Welcome back to Boom and Bust. We're here with our panel, the Honorable Gary Marr, the Honorable Joe Oliver, and Sandra Pupatello. Gary, I didn't want to shortchange you there. You were making a really important point about how different. Sandra already made that point about Windsor and southwestern Ontario, a little bit of a boom happening with the auto sector. Tell us a little bit more about what's happening in Alberta.
Well, there's been growth in the numbers of people that have been coming to the province of Alberta. I look in my own neighborhood and I see, license plates of vehicles that have come from British Columbia and Ontario and Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and it's an extraordinary thing to see. And when you dig down into it, I think what you'll find is there are people who are cashing out of their $4 million house in Toronto. They're buying an equivalent house here in the city of Calgary for $1.5 million, and they're banking the $2.5 million, investing it, and they're planning to retire 10 years earlier. So it is a little bit different. Oil prices were projected sort of in the government's budget back in February to be at about $78 a barrel. It dropped below that quite a bit, but now it's sort of recovered and it's up around 85. So government coffers are looking good. Infrastructure investment is up. There's been a transition from the typical oil and gas into new energies, and new technology companies are finding themselves locating here in Calgary, where office rent is very inexpensive. So it's not something that is universal across Canada. But as Sandra pointed out, in Windsor, there's sort of a regional difference. In Alberta, there's a bit of a regional difference as well.
Very interesting. And the Alberta advantage strikes again, right? So we'll have to watch that for sure.
Well, that very phenomena, interestingly, is frankly what's driven up the housing prices in places like Welland, outside of major cities, St. Thomas, et cetera. So those same phenomena where people are suddenly moving out, cashing out of the big cities and moving into the smaller towns or smaller cities, driving the price up so that what used to be an affordable home is now double the price. So as much as the interest rate isn't as bad as it was in the 80s, those prices of what they're paying in premiums for mortgages are pretty unaffordable right now. And that's the conundrum. The industry can't keep up with building. The housing market is just not responding quick enough. And I think we're seeing that across the country.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. We were going to get to that. So obviously the housing crisis is top of the headlines across the country. Was the topic for the cabinet retreat of the Trudeau government. Obviously, here in Ontario, a little bit more controversial, perhaps, but still, the idea of building houses is something that has to be considered very, very strongly. So, I'd love to get your feedback on this policy item. Are there things that governments can do that can make a difference? Sandra, you opened us up on that. So, why don't you continue your thoughts on this?
I know that the Greenbelt is a big controversy right now in Ontario, but that really is for a pretty exclusive club that could afford to go living around King City. The bulk of the population of Ontario isn't affording that kind of house. So I think if you come down to my neck of the woods or London or any of the others, Ottawa, where are they going to buy a home if that's in fact what they're destined to do? And it's very difficult. There used to be a focus and support by government for things like brownfields and how you can turn that infill around into housing. And I'm certainly seeing that around my neighborhood. I think governments can get more creative in assisting with what Gary mentioned, lots of office space. How do you renovate those facilities and create more apartments instead of commercial? Is downtown Toronto really going to go back to what it was? There's all kinds of stories these days about working from home at least part of the time. People have been doing hoteling and office space for many years now. So I do think governments can get more clever in how they can incent behavior in the private sector to create more housing.
Joe, do you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. Look, one of the critical issues, of course, is the way regulation has strangled development and retarded it and made it more expensive. And we simply have to do something about that because it's just costing more to build. There's more uncertainty for investors, and that, coupled with the fact that we've had an extraordinary increase in the number of immigrants. Now, the government doesn't want to deal with that issue directly, but there is no question that if 1 million people came in last year, and the total was that, including students and temporary workers and
Right.
so on,